that credit and then complete the session survey. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this session, Dr. Peter Jensen.
Thank you. Welcome to our panel on identity and experience. We have 4 great papers that I'm looking forward to hearing more about. Try to keep your comments to around 10 minutes. We'll open up for Q&A at the end of this. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with the solo opinion with how do African student victims of domestic violence describe their experiences to American counselors? Right, Basol.
Thank you. Okay. Can you all hear me loud and clear? Great. Hi everyone, my name is Bisola Miriam, and I'm going to be making a proposal presentation titled How do African student victims of domestic violence describe their experiences to, I beg your pardon, there's a typo there, to their American counselors. So, a little info about me. I am interested, research-wise, I'm interested in interpersonal communication, abuse and violence in interpersonal and organizational communication settings. And I'm also interested in the ways in which the law and social structures can be engaged to better make justice available to marginalized people. So, in my proposed study, I am interested in looking at the ways in which African student victims of domestic violence who are studying or schooling in American universities describe their experiences to the American counselors. And the justification for this study, I arrived at, the justification for this study based on 3 reasons. And the first is the fact that African students continue to come abroad. I mean, the US is constantly experiencing an influx of international students, among which are African students who come from their own countries to study. In addition to that, this student oftentimes come with varying degrees of, trauma from their own countries, and in some other cases, they actually start to experience these traumatic experiences when they arrive in these host institutions. And another thing that I think is very important as we think about, as I talk about my proposed study, is the way in which COVID and internet-mediated communication have come to impact. Have come to lead to a rethink of abuse and violence, especially the ways in which these experiences complicate the lives of international students. So personally, as someone who is currently recovering from, the trauma associated with intimate partner violence, digital abuse, and organizational violence, I can talk about the ways in which, one, digital communication has led to, has exposed me to abuse in a way that I had never thought about. Secondly, I personally have also seen the ways in which these experiences, especially the trauma of the last 12 months, have impacted not just my personal life, but also my professional life as a graduate student and researcher here. Lastly, one important point that I would like to stress here is that when international students, like African students like me and some other African students out there, come to study in the US, we contribute significantly to America's educational and economic development. In spending and tax payments, we contribute economically, and in research, we get involved by contributing our intellectual resource towards the advancement of research in the United States. And so these reasons are what have informed my decision to not just think about what I have gone through, but to ask myself the ways in which I can use my personal experience as a springboard for continuing this conversation and see the ways in which the schools in which students like me get admitted or get enrolled into can think about ways to better, design or improve, or maybe the word should be improve, the available healthcare services, especially counseling services available to them. And so for what I looked at what has been done before, and I realized that most of the literatures only focus on African Americans victims of domestic violence and Africans with other immigrant status. So the studies out there have not looked specifically at the experiences of African students. So there are different Africans out there. There are several Africans in the United States, but we all come into the US with different status. Now think about the ways in the fact that as students, you live on stipend and you may not be able to actually afford the kind of counseling services that you want. So you only get to use what is available within the university. And I'm also looking at how that, that limitation in terms of access as kind of limits the choices available to African student victims of domestic violence. Now for my study, I would be using co-cultural theory, and basically the idea behind co-cultural theory is that members of minority group members practice or employ certain communicative devices or practices when interacting with members from dominant groups. And so for me, as a minority student studying here, I realized that in my interaction with my American counselor, I constantly, was practicing or employing certain communicative practices. Well, at some point I saw myself assimilating, and there were times that I went from assimilating to, feeling muted. And so these are some of the things that I intend to explore deeply in this study. And so for this very study, I am proposing two questions. The first is, how do African student victims of domestic violence and abuse communicate their experiences to the American counselors? Also, how do American counselors describe the communicative behaviors of African student victims of domestic violence when the latter describe their experiences? So for this study, considering the sensitive nature of this study, I intend to work and take note of the necessary research ethics, and I would get an IRB approval, and after that I would begin to collect data. And one of the things that I intend to also ensure is to protect the mental health of participants by also educating them even during the process. If of course there is any need for them to check out, definitely there would be need to make that available. I would definitely make that provision available onto them. And for this study, I intend to commence 6 months from today. This study would be executed and completed. The proposed sample size, 12 participants, and there would be in-depth interviews which will run from 30 minutes to 1 hour. And I intend to follow an unstructured format to allow for free flow of conversation. And I think I have come to the end of my presentation. If you are interested in this, or perhaps you have other questions for me, please feel free to email me. Because I will be joining another panel, I will not be able to stay till the end for the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mary. Great. Next we have body esteem of LGBTQ plus individuals.
I did it, guys. I did it.